Hello everyone, how y'all doing? A moment here. Awesome. So who do we who do we have that's viewing right now? Well, link will be there in the chat. If anybody wants to join, I'll go ahead and put the link out there now. I'll actually allow joining at any point during this one. Mm -mm. Boom. All right. So the chat is up. Boom. I'll put it there as well if anybody wants to join. And the topic today, as is shown in the video there, is the history and future of A Course in Miracles. So a few people have heard me speak on A Course in Miracles a bit here and there, or on pure non-dualism, but I don't think I've ever done a talk specifically on the Course in Miracles. So I said it last week. I'll go ahead and do that today. So I'll talk a little bit about it. I'll see if there's any questions or if anybody wants to join, and that'll be the session for today. Could open up to other topics later, but this will be the topic I'll be starting with. So, A Course in Miracles is a document that actually came about in the 70s, if I remember right, by a process of channeling. There's a lady by the name of Helen Schuckman. Let me add her image on here. That's her there. And she started to hear an inner voice, like an inner dictation, that basically told her at one point uh, to please take notes. This is the Course in Miracles. Please take notes. And the background is she's a psychologist, and she was experiencing the basically the negative environment of the uh, professional academic community at the time in the university she was at teaching at and working at, where there was a lot of competition and a lot of aggressiveness and things like that was going on, and she was basically at odds with her boss, who was another psychologist, teacher or professor. And eventually they was going through so much turmoil and negativity and all of this stuff that they decided together that there must be another way, a better way of dealing with each other and interacting with people and resolving things in the world than, this constant frustration and competition and all of this stuff. So she was actually expecting an argument, another argument, but instead he basically was like, I agree there must be a better way. Let's go ahead and find it together. And let me put her name up there as well. I make sure I spell her name right. right? Helen Schuckman right there. So they decided together to work on a better way, a better way to interact with each other, with the world, and so on and so forth. And she started to have a whole bunch of very symbolic and uh, telling visions and dreams. Like I remember one dream I read about where she was walking down the boardwalk, and at one point she just saw that everybody was connected, everybody was one, everybody was part of one mind. And actually, that might have been the actual real world experience when she was walking down. She had other visions and dreams that she began to write down and note. And eventually, the voice had came like a sort of indictation, like a silent voice that said, "This is a Course in Miracles. Please take notes." And she started noting this down. Um, Her partner in crime, you can say, was Bill Thetford. And let me bring up his image here. And maybe I should have made this slideshow. I'll do that now. Oh, this would be fine actually. So, Bill Thetford was her partner in crime. Let me add this image here. So, he was another research psychologist. And what happened is when she started to get the dictation and started to note these things down, he was there to help her by um, taking those shorthand dictations that she made and actually typing them out in regular words. Boom. Let's build that for his image there. So she would take the dictation and he would, in shorthand, like basically she had a shorthand notebook and she would take the dictation down. And then he would take these shorthand notebooks and he would type out the shorthand into, uh, full word, full sentences and so on and so forth. And this is how the course was dictated. It was dictated over the course of 7 years, and it was basically put into these large blue binders, and it took like I don't know how many binders altogether, but I know that somewhere they have those things stored. I think, and even in one of the in archives, one of the universities in the country, where they have the original shorthand notebook store. Sometimes you can go online and see some of the scannings or the images of the notebooks. Then they have this big sort of binders where they keep the typed out or printed out ones there. So that's those two. And let me put his name there. Now, when these people first started to dictate these things and put these things down, it was at first not as uh, organized as it is now. Like right now, the course has been, I was reading earlier, over 3 million print copies of the course has been published. It's in like 25 or 30 languages now around the country. And but at the time, of course, it was just these rough binders that was put together from the shorthand notes of Helen Schuckman. So what happened is there was a man that came along named Kenneth Wapnick, and Kenneth Wapnick came along and uh, helped out with the formatting of the book. So that's an image of Kenneth Wapnick right there. Um, None of these people, none of these three are alive right now. Kenneth Wapnick died about a few years ago, like I don't know, maybe 4 years ago. And but he came along and took these rough uh, text and added some formatting and helped make it a bit more presentable. And eventually, this became the published book. So at this point in the journey of the course, you have Helen Schuckman, who dictated the course. You have Bill Thetford, who I guess you could say translated those dictations to a format that was more readable, like the actual wording and the actual sentences. And one of the first printings of the course was basically just a typing up of these notes that Bill Thetford had put together. And they printed those up and handed them out to several people. And that's one of the earliest versions of the course that came out. And it wasn't necessarily published, it was just printed up so that it could be shared amongst various people. Now, the fourth person that came along in this venture was a lady named Judith Scutch. I'll add an image of her right now. So Judith Scutch came along, and she was the one who actually founded the Foundation for Inner Peace, which is the only authentic publisher of the course now. So there's people who came along and wanted to sort of do their own thing and took earlier versions of the course before it was really copyrighted and put those out there to try to make this sort of own version of it. But Foundation for Inner Peace is the one that really publishes the course in its actual form where it's authentic. So basically, Helen Schuckman, Bill Thetford, and Kenneth Wapnick, they were basically the three people who were putting the course in a nice readable format. And when Judith Scutch came along, she actually started the foundation that started to publish the course in a wide format. Like the first publishing of the course had like about 300 copies, then it went to about 500 copies, and like I said, now there's millions of copies published worldwide in like 25, 30 different languages, and they're constantly adding more languages and expert people to come along and translate it. So these four people are primarily responsible for A Course in Miracles being put out into the world. And actually, what is A Course in Miracles? So I talked about a little bit how it came about, but what is it? So basically, it's a teaching, like the voice, and this takes a bit more explanation, but in short, the voice that dictated the course to Helen Schuckman identified itself as Jesus or Joshua, who at the time was really Yeshua, and really it's the voice of the part of our mind that recognizes the world, the universe as an illusion. But this voice took on the persona or the guise of Yeshua and spoke from his perspective, and basically is a self study course that teaches the a practice of forgiveness that allows one to heal the unconscious guilt that we have in our mind and eventually awaken from the dream that we call life or that we call existence. So it's a self-study spiritual course. It's a lifelong spiritual path on the different way of looking at and interpreting the world, which again goes back to the uh, the resolution that brought the dictation about, which was the resolution between Bill Thetford and Helen Schuckman to find a different way to relate to the world and relate to each other. So this new way that came about was this course, and the course is actually uh, composed of three major sections. You can say four. Like the first book or section of the course is the text, And basically, the text lays out the foundation of A Course in Miracles, like the thought system, what it teaches. And then there's the workbook, which is the second part of the course, which which basically takes the theory that's laid out in the text and puts it into a 1 year or 365-day long practice routine, where you basically practice implementing the thought system of the course over a year. After that, there's the manual for teachers, which includes the clarification of terms. So the manual for teachers is basically a question and answer section that answers certain questions about the course and about the application of the course. And at the back of the manual, there's like a clarification of terms that basically talks about the um, different terms that the course uses and defines it in the way that's utilized in the course. In the third edition of the book, which I'll bring up now, I'll bring up the cover of it. There's also some pamphlets uh, that Hannah Schuckman subsequently channeled, called the Song of Prayer and Psychotherapy, um, Purpose and Practice. So give me a moment. I'll add an image of the cover of the third edition of the course. So give me a moment here. I'll add that briefly. Right. So this is the third edition of A Course in Miracles. This is what the cover looks like if you were to get like a hard cover or a um soft cover of the book, as well as the like a online ebook edition. That's what it looks like. So starts with the preface. Basically, so the first version of the course was published in 3 different volumes. Like there was a separate book for the text, then a separate book for the workbook, then a separate book for the manual. And the second edition had the workbook, the text, and the manual all in one volume. And then uh, they made the third edition where they combined the supplements, which is the uh, supplements that Helen channeled later. And also she channeled a preface because a lot of people were asking about a sort of introduction to the workbook. There is an introduction in the front of the text, but people were asking for a sort of introduction to the text overall, and then she basically wrote a brief history of the course in the preface, the first part of the preface, and how it came about, and also what it says, which is a brief synopsis of the course in the preface part at the front. So in the third edition, you have the preface, you have the text, you have the workbook for students, the manual for teachers, which includes the clarification of terms, and then you have the supplements, which is all again published by the Foundation for Inner Peace. So if you do want to study A Course in Miracles, it's advised that you get the authentic publication of the course, which is published by the Foundation for Inner Peace, and that's the only authentic publisher of the course. Like there's other people who wanted to, I guess, want to become famous or be spiritual or whatever, and just like jump the gun and trying to say that they're publishing the authentic version. Like some of them found the rough draft of the course, which I believe, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like basically the rough draft of the course that some people publish, and I'll try to say it's the real course, and there's some controversy. But if you really want to get the authentic course, you want to go ahead and get the one from the Foundation of Inner Peace, which is the third edition, which has the supplements as well. And actually comes from the original people who actually channeled and put the course together and brought it to the world. Now, there's somebody else who came on the scene more recently, a guy named Gary Renard. And what's interesting about him is, and you'll find this with a lot of people who um, come to the course, they reach a point where they're basically frustrated with the world, and they're like, I would like a different way of relating to the world, of interacting with the world. And Gary Renard came to that realization. And what happened with him was these ascended masters visited him. So an ascended master is basically a non-physical being, not even a non-physical being, but a uh, like basically we have the part of our mind that recognizes that the world is illusion. The Course calls this the right mind or the Holy Spirit. And sometimes this aspect of the mind can take form. Uh, Let me put his name there in front of his picture here. And sometimes this aspect of the mind will take form in the world, and it'll be like a physical or real being, but it's really a representation of that aspect of our mind. It's called an ascended master. So you can have an enlightened being, which is basically like an incarnate being like us, who heals all the guilt in their mind and becomes fully aware that this world is not real and fully aware of that reality is totally beyond this universe, and they become enlightened. And then you can have an ascendant master, which is a representation in the world of this aspect of our mind that recognizes the world is not real. So basically, Gary Renard was sitting on his sofa meditating, and when he opened his eyes, these two beings were sitting on his sofa. And over the course of several years, these beings would just pop in and just appear in his living room or appear wherever he was. And he taught him pure non-dualism with A Course in Miracles as the course book from which they taught. And they basically they did all kind of things to show him things like they teleported him around different places. They took him through time. They took him out of body and showed him different alien races and things like that over the course of many years. He wrote several books, including like The Disappearance of the Universe and uh, Your Immortal Reality. And what's interesting about them is they actually took the course and broke it down and broke down exactly what it means, because a lot of people misunderstand what the course is saying. Like the course has a concept called the real world, for instance. And the real world is basically how we see the world when we're free of guilt, when we're free of anger and judgment and condemnation, and when we look at the world from a place of inner peace. We'll interpret the world differently than we do looking at the world from a place of judgment and guilt. And the Course calls this the real world. But some people mistakenly mean the real world is, I get what I want in the world, and it works how I want, and I'm happy because I get what I want in the world. But that's not it at all. A lot of people mistakenly believe that the miracle in the Course in Miracles is something like, you know, um, making water turn into wine or walking on water or healing people. That's not the miracle that A Course in Miracles is talking about. The miracle is changing our perception from uh, judgment and condemnation and believing that the world is real to an interpretation of the world that's based upon non-judgment and inner peace. Is really changing our mind from an interpretation of what the Course calls the ego, that judgmental part of our mind, to an interpretation of the world that's from a peaceful place. And that's what the miracle is talking about. So basically, these ascended masters came along and broke these things down to Gary Renard. And eventually, he started to record what they were saying on his recorder, and he would transcribe it. And that's what his books are. His books are basically transcriptions of conversations he had with these ascended masters that appeared in his living room or wherever he was, and basically taught him and broke some things down to him about the Course. And I think his books are invaluable if you want to learn and understand what a Course is about. You can see the images flashing on the screen to the right. Three of the four books I've published so far on the Course in Miracles. So the first book I published is Travel Forward. It's a course on astral projection and astral travel. The next book I published is Forgive and Be Free, or Forgiving People Who Believe the Earth is Flat, which detailed the thought processes I applied in my judgment of flat earth people, which I'm still working on. I'm going to make a second edition of that book. And then I started to teach study groups on the course, either in person or online. And I took 12 of those classes, and I took transcripts of those and put them in the book that's showing right there, Classes on the Course in Miracles. Uh, and also, wrote this book called Existential Suicide, which is not published yet. But it talks about a bit about how enlightenment is really existential suicide. It's really acknowledging and identifying that the self is not existent. The self is not real, even though the self seems important and vital in our separated state when we believe in a separation. But ultimately, nobody reaches enlightenment. A person reaches a state of peace, which is what A Course in Miracles teaches how to reach that state of perfect peace, let go of our judgment and so forth. And from that state of perfect peace, we're in a position of letting go of our individuality itself, and that's enlightenment, when we finally let go of our hold on individuality altogether, and the self goes away, and then we just become a sieve through which that right mind can present itself in the world. And then that lifetime when we die, we don't reincarnate again. That's basically breaking the cycle of birth and death, which is enlightenment. Um, so that's pretty much a little synopsis of the history and what the Course is now. Brief thing about the future of the Course. The Ascended Masters that visit Gary Renard, so remember an Ascended Master is a manifestation of the world, of that aspect of the mind. And when I say mind, I mean a universal mind that's dreaming the dream. That, basically the mind that I got in touch with when I had that universal experience. There's a part of that mind that recognizes that the world is a dream, and that only God is real. And it uses the term God because it's spoken in a sort of Christian framework, but you can call it a reality or a oneness, but that absolute reality has nothing to do with this universe at all. That universal reality didn't create the world and anything. This is absolutely illusory. And with the Ascended Master that visited Gary Renard, they teach that at some point in the future, it'll become generally understood that A Course in Miracles is really a document that represents the teaching that Yeshua really taught, or Jesus really taught, and that it was really authentically dictated by this aspect of the mind called the Holy Spirit, which you can say is Jesus, because again, any enlightened being lets go of their individual self and they become a manifestation in the world of that right mind. So in a real sense, Yeshua, in the last part of his life, the last few years of his life, when he became enlightened, was that right mind. Just like the Ascended Masters, it's just there's a difference between being an incarnate being with a self that lets go of itself and becomes enlightenment, or that right part of the mind projecting an image in the world, like an Ascended Master that just appears and can just be here for a while and then just disappear back. That image of projection just disappears back into nothingness, but for the duration that it's projecting that body, it's a real body that's there. But at a certain point in the future, they say that it'll be generally known on Earth that A Course in Miracles is an authentic document, an authentic spiritual document that represents that part of the mind that represents what Yeshua really taught, which was misunderstood even by his disciples, which is even said in the Bible. But that is a very authentic and direct representation of what he taught. But I don't know how far into the future that'll be. It might even be 1,000 years in the future from now. But at some point, that'll be recognized and understood. So that's basically a brief understanding and synopsis of what the Course is based upon my study of the Course and reading the preface of the Course and reading Kenneth Wapnick put out a book on the history of the Course. And there's other people who put out histories of the Course and where it came from. And of course, you could look online and see some things that came about. Does anybody here who's watching have any questions, whether they want to come on and say any questions verbally, or if you have any questions in the live chat that you want to put up, you could let me know. I'll stay here for a minute or two and see if there's any questions about anything before I close up. So I'll be here just for a minute. If there's any questions and comments, do speak up now. And of course, if you have questions later, you could just make a question on the comments on the video itself. So before I go, let me show some links. Put some links together for people who might be interested to hear to check it out. Let me see here. Oh, here we go. So, actually, let me disappear the Hangout so I can make this bigger here. So the foundation that was founded by Judith Scutch. That's at acim.org. So you can go there and read more about the course and the history, and you could get the course there or online in several places. That's acim.org, and for course of courseofmiracles.org. FACIM.org. FACIM.org. That's the foundation for A Course in Miracles. And that's the teaching institution that Kenneth Wapnick founded. Kenneth Wapnick and his wife, Gloria Wapnick, founded to teach A Course in Miracles. So I went there a few times over the years and visited or attended some workshops that he taught, that Kenneth Wapnick taught. In the back of my course books, I have some pictures from when I was there. But you can go there and find some workshops and books from Kenneth Wapnick. So I think his teachings are invaluable. If you ever want to study A Course in Miracles, go to facim.org and you can get books of his. You can get audios from his workshops as well as videos of his workshops when he's talking about the Course and Helen Schuckman and so forth. You can go to my site, DarrylEBarrettJr.com. That's DarrylEBerrygr.com. I have at least the first half of classes on the Course in Miracles up on the website that you can read. And when you read it, if you like it, and you're ready to read the rest, give me an email or what have you, and I'll add the rest to the site. But so far, like half of it is there. I'm kind of waiting for somebody to actually read it and say, hey, you can go ahead and put the rest up, and I'll go ahead and take the time and put the other half of the book up. And also GaryRenard.com, GaryRenard.com. That's Gary Renard's website where you can go and see some of his talks. He's still doing some workshops and lectures and talks around the world. You can go there and see his talking schedule, as well as see links to his books and some things about him. That's GaryRenard.com. He actually wrote like an endorsement of my first course of book classes on the Course in Miracles. So I appreciated that. He gave it a look over and made a brief endorsement that I put into the front of the book. So thanks everybody for joining who watched. Thank you for the like. Looks like I see somebody gave a like to the video. I'm glad you enjoyed it and we appreciate you watching. And this is Darryl Lee Barrett Jr. with Realizing the Shape number 44, The History and Future of A Course in Miracles. So I'll be back Sunday of next week at 2 p.m. Central Time. I don't know what the topic will be. But I'll be back Sunday and we'll talk about something. It'll be something that's listed on this cover image here. So as you can see, talk about the basics of science, astral travel, out of body, spirituality, extraterrestrial, space travel, flat earth debates and debunking, even though I do that less now, astronomy, pure non-dualism, A Course in Miracles, ancient and future civilizations, altered states, contact, which means contact with extraterrestrials. It could also be contact with non-physical beings, frontiers of science, altered states, and higher thought like fourth density thought from the ETs or pure non-dualism that could relate to several different types of advanced thought. So like, subscribe, chat, comment. Again, thanks for who's watching and gave a thumbs up on the video. And I'll be back next week on next Sunday and give another talk on one of these topics or in a related topic. And if there's no questions or comments, I do hope you have a nice day.